Put your hand against your chest for 10 seconds. Do not think about belief. Do not think about heaven. Do not think about death as an idea. Feel only the mechanical fact. A pump compressing, relaxing, compressing again. Roughly once every second, a pressure wave is being fired through a closed hydraulic network. Blood moves because muscle fibers shorten. The fibers shorten because calcium ions move through membrane channels. The channels open because voltage changes across a wall, thinner than a wavelength of visible light. And somewhere above that pump, inside 1.5 kilograms of warm tissue, 86 billion neurons are holding a temporary electrical pattern together and calling it you. That is the first uncomfortable part. You do not feel like a pattern. You feel like an owner. You feel as if there is a passenger sitting behind the eyes, using the body, the way a driver uses a machine. The hands are tools. The voice is an output device. The brain is an instrument panel. The body ages, repairs, fails, and eventually stops. But the passenger seems separate from the equipment. That is the intuition behind the question. Where does the soul go when the machine stops? Physics begins by refusing the picture. Not because it has disproved every possible meaning of the word soul. That would be too easy and too dishonest. Physics begins by asking what is moving, what is conserved, what interacts, what leaves a signal, what can push a detector, what can change a number on an instrument. Feynman's uncomfortable truth was not a slogan about death. It was a way of seeing nature so stripped of comfort that no hidden passenger is allowed into the explanation unless it does physical work. In that view, the human being is not a ghost operating matter. The human being is matter doing a very specific kind of operation. Feynman once said that if all scientific knowledge were destroyed and only one sentence could be passed to the next generation, the most information would be contained in the atomic hypothesis. Everything is made of atoms, little particles moving around, attracting and repelling according to their separations. That sounds simple until you apply it without mercy. Your skin is atoms, your eyes are atoms, your memories are atoms arranged into proteins, membranes, synaptic weights, ionic gradients, molecular switches, and electrical timing. Your grief is atoms, your love is atoms. Not dead particles pretending to be alive, but particles organized into a circuit so elaborate that it can model itself and then be startled by its own existence. The atoms are not the mystery being denied, they are the mystery being faced directly. A single neuron is not conscious, it is a wet electrical component. Its membrane holds a voltage difference of roughly -70 millivolts between inside and outside, maintained by sodium-potassium pumps that spend ATP like a power station spending fuel. Sodium ions are kept mostly outside. Potassium ions are kept mostly inside. The membrane is a gate array. When the voltage crosses a threshold, the gate opens, sodium rushes in, the voltage flips, and an action potential travels down the axon as a moving electrical pulse. Not a metaphor, a pulse. At the end of the wire, calcium enters. Vesicles fuse. Neurotransmitter is released across a synaptic gap measured in nanometers. Receptors open on the next cell, a probability changes. A circuit leans toward firing or silence. Multiply that by trillions of synaptic contacts, and the result is not a single spark hiding in the brain. It is a distributed switching pattern, constantly refreshed, constantly corrected, constantly powered. The self is not sitting in the circuit. The self is what the circuit does when enough of it is running in the right rhythm. This is why death is mechanically different from leaving a room. When a person dies, no valve opens and releases a measurable substance called personality into the air. No conserved unit of memory exits the skull. No known field carries your childhood, your name, your private embarrassments, your favorite song, your fear of losing people as a structured signal through space. What leaves the body is ordinary physics: heat, carbon dioxide, water vapor, chemical energy, infrared radiation, momentum transferred to the bed, sound waves if there is a last breath. The atoms remain, the energy remains. The pattern does not. That distinction is the center of the problem. Energy is conserved. This is often misunderstood so badly that it becomes a comforting phrase with no mechanical content. People say, energy cannot be destroyed, so something of you must continue. But energy is not identity. Energy is not memory. Energy is not a face. A running engine contains energy. A burned engine still contains energy. The question is not whether the energy exists. The question is whether the arrangement that made the system an engine is still present. The difference between a living brain and a dead brain is not that one has atoms and the other does not. It is not that one has energy and the other does not. It is organization under constraint. Think of a radio transmitter. When current moves through the circuit in the correct oscillating pattern, An electromagnetic wave carries structure outward. Tune a receiver to the frequency and information appears. Now cut the power, melt several components, scatter the solder, and weigh the remains. The mass has not vanished. The atoms are still there. The energy has changed forms. But the broadcast is gone because broadcasting was never a separate object inside the machine. It was the machine operating. Consciousness may be like that. The evidence does not require a tiny observer hidden in the cortex. It requires a sustained, integrated process. We do not yet possess a final theory of consciousness, and anyone who says otherwise is selling a completed bridge over an unfinished river, but the dependency is not vague. Change blood flow and consciousness changes. Change oxygen delivery and consciousness changes. Change anesthetic concentration in the synaptic machinery and consciousness disappears. Change the electrical rhythms of cortex and thalamus and the contents of experience change with them. The dial moves when the circuit changes. During cardiac arrest, the hydraulic system fails first. The heart stops producing useful pressure. Cerebral blood flow collapses. Human studies show that consciousness is lost within seconds when blood flow to the brain is absent. The reason is not poetic. The brain has almost no patience for fuel interruption. It consumes about 20% of the body's energy at rest while representing only a small fraction of body mass. That energy does not create a glowing inner substance. It runs pumps. It restores ion gradients. It resets membranes after firing. It keeps electrical order from dissolving into chemical equilibrium. The sodium-potassium pump is one of the quiet machines holding you together. Every second that oxygen and glucose are delivered, mitochondria make ATP. ATP powers the pumps. The pumps maintain gradients. The gradients allow voltage. Voltage allows signaling. Signaling allows the circuit state that can contain perception, memory, intention, and the feeling of being located behind your eyes. Remove the oxygen supply and the chain begins to fail. ATP falls. Pumps slow. Ions drift toward equilibrium. Neurons depolarize. Calcium enters where it should not. Glutamate can flood synapses. The electrical grid loses control. The person does not float upward from the mechanism. The mechanism loses the conditions required to make a person, but there is a second mechanism operating at the same time, and it is easy to miss because it is slower. The body is not a statue that becomes motionless at death. It is a chemical reactor whose active regulation has stopped. While alive, you are maintaining disequilibrium. Your temperature, pH, ion concentrations, oxygen pressure, glucose level, membrane voltages, bacterial boundaries, and fluid compartments are all being controlled against entropy. Life is not merely movement. Life is expensive order. Death is the end of active correction. The moment correction stops, ordinary gradients begin to win. Carbon dioxide accumulates and changes acidity. Calcium leaks into cells. Enzymes begin cutting structures that were previously maintained. Membranes lose selectivity. Bacteria that were once contained by immune barriers and oxygen levels begin exploiting the newly unguarded chemistry. Proteins unfold, tissues soften, heat flows outward into the room. The body does not become nothing. It becomes uncontrolled physics, not punishment, not drama, relaxation of constraints. This is where the question, where does the soul go, becomes mechanically sharper. If by soul one means the atoms, they do not go to a single place. They distribute. Some carbon leaves as carbon dioxide through the last exchanges of air and later through decomposition. Some water evaporates or enters soil. Nitrogen returns through microbial chemistry. Calcium remains in bone for a time, then eventually participates in mineral cycles. Hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, sodium, potassium, iron, and trace metals continue through reservoirs that do not know your name. The atoms continue. An atom of carbon in your hand may once have been in limestone, then air, then a leaf, then bread, then blood, then collagen. It did not become you by entering your body. It became part of you only because the living system locked it temporarily into a pattern. Later, another system will lock it into a different pattern. This is not reincarnation in a mystical sense. It is material continuity without personal continuity. The universe is very good at reusing hardware. It does not preserve the software unless the software is copied into another working machine, and this is the hard boundary. Memory is not stored in carbon as carbon. Memory is stored in arrangement. A sentence written on paper, and the same paper burned into ash, contain many of the same atoms for a time. The atoms are not enough. The information was in the pattern of ink, fibers, contrast, and spatial order. Once that order is thermally scrambled, the paper has not been annihilated, but the sentence is gone. You can say the atoms are still in the universe, correct? You cannot say the sentence is still readable. That requires structure. A human life is a sentence written in unstable chemistry. The brain writes it by adjusting synapses, strengthening some pathways, weakening others, laying down molecular tags, changing receptor densities, altering dendritic spines, and coordinating oscillations across networks. Long-term potentiation depends on NMDA receptors, calcium entry, AMPA receptor trafficking, kinase cascades, gene transcription, protein synthesis. Memory is not vapor, it is machinery adjusted by use. Personality is not a floating jewel. It is the behavioral output of a nervous system shaped by genes, development, injury, repetition, hunger, sleep, hormones, culture, and time. A machine, but not a simple one. Calling it a machine does not make it crude. A star is a machine. A galaxy is a gravitational machine. A cell is a chemical machine. A brain is an electrochemical prediction machine with feedback from a body. The word machine only means that it works by parts under lawful constraints. It does not mean it is easy to build, easy to understand, or emotionally small. The mistake is thinking that mechanical explanation drains value. It does not. It removes counterfeit mystery and leaves the real one exposed. The real mystery is that atoms can be arranged so they care what happens next. Now place Feynman back into the question. He was not offering a comforting map of the afterlife. He was a physicist trained to ask what can be calculated, what can be measured, and where nature hides the mechanism. The uncomfortable truth in his style of thinking is not that science has inspected heaven and found it empty. Science has no instrument pointed at a metaphysical destination outside physical interaction. The uncomfortable truth is narrower and colder. Every part of the person that physics can track is bound to the body's organization, and when that organization fails, physics tracks transformation, not departure. No known equation contains a term for personal identity leaving the skull. There is mass, there is energy, there is charge, there is momentum, there is angular momentum, there are fields, there are particles, there are interactions. There are conservation laws, there is entropy, there is information in physical states, but there is no measured conserved quantity corresponding to your private point of view. If such a thing exists, it has not been detected as a force, a radiation, a particle, a field, a heat anomaly, a mass change, or a reproducible signal. That is not proof of absence in the absolute philosophical sense. It is evidence calibration. Physics can say with strength what happens to the body. It can say what happens to the heat. It can say what happens to the blood pressure when the pump fails. It can say what happens to neurons deprived of oxygen and glucose. It can say what happens to atoms as metabolism stops and chemistry continues. It can say that memories require physical substrates while we observe them in living brains. It cannot honestly say it has weighed a soul leaving the body. It cannot honestly say it has followed a self into another dimension. It has no such trace. The honest answer is less theatrical and more severe. The part of you that physics can identify does not go somewhere. It stops being assembled. This is why near-death experiences occupy such a strange place in the discussion. They are real experiences in the sense that people report them with force, structure, and lasting emotional power. In the AWARE-2 study, led by Sam Parnia and colleagues, researchers examined hundreds of in-hospital cardiac arrests and interviewed survivors. Some reported memories or perceptions from the period surrounding resuscitation, and a subset described experiences with themes often called transcendent. That matters. The reports should not be mocked or flattened. They are human data. But experience during a rescue is not the same thing as proof of a detachable soul. Cardiac arrest is not a single clean switch from existence to non-existence. It is a process. CPR can generate partial blood flow. Drugs can alter physiology. Oxygen can return in pulses. EEG activity can appear or disappear in complex ways. The dying or recovering brain may generate organized experience under extreme conditions. Some researchers have reported brief surges of high-frequency activity in animal models after cardiac arrest. Others study rare human recordings near death. The field is active because the boundary is not as simple as the public imagines, but the uncertainty cuts both ways. It allows investigation of dying brain activity. It does not license a conclusion that memory has escaped matter. A strange signal in a failing circuit is still a signal in a circuit until shown otherwise. A vivid report after resuscitation is evidence that experience occurred, or was later reconstructed, around a period of physiological crisis. It is not, by itself, a map of where a soul went. The physics supports caution. The direct evidence for a separate traveling self does not exist, And here is where the story becomes more uncomfortable than simple denial. The self you are protecting with the word soul is already less stable than it feels. The body replaces material constantly. Water turns over, proteins are made and degraded, lipids move, cells divide, die, and are cleared. Even in the brain, where many neurons persist for decades, the molecules inside them are replaced, repaired, transported, phosphorylated, folded, unfolded, and recycled. You are not the same collection of atoms you were as a child. Yet you feel continuous. Continuity does not require the same atoms. It requires preserved organization across change. A whirlpool in a river can persist while the water molecules composing it change every moment. Point to the whirlpool, and it seems like an object. It has a location, a shape, a behavior, a persistence. But no single water molecule is the whirlpool. The whirlpool is a pattern imposed on flow. Change the rocks, the current, the slope, the incoming volume, and the whirlpool weakens or vanishes. The water continues downstream. The whirlpool does not travel as a hidden bead inside the river. The self is closer to the whirlpool than to a stone. Every morning the pattern reboots through sleep, blood sugar, vestibular orientation, memory reconstruction, light entering the retina, and the body's internal clocks. You do not wake as a sealed immortal object. You wake as a process that successfully restarts. The feeling of being the same person is built by memory systems and body maps that reconnect. Damage the hippocampus and new continuity can fail. Damage the right parietal cortex and body ownership can distort. Change dopamine circuits and motivation shifts. Change the frontal networks and impulse control changes. The passenger changes when the machinery changes. This is the evidence that should make anyone careful before claiming the soul is obviously independent of the brain. The supposed driver is altered by damage to the dashboard, but the opposite error is also possible. Some people hear this and think the conclusion is that human life is merely chemicals. The word merely is doing the deception. Chemicals include every taste you have ever loved, every sentence that changed you, every fear that tightened your chest, every calculation that sent spacecraft past planets, every violin note, every apology, every face recognized after years. The fact that these are physical does not make them small. It makes matter stranger than our old categories allowed. Feynman's atomic view does not make the universe empty, it makes it intimate. The atoms in the body were not manufactured for you. Hydrogen in your water traces back to the early universe. Carbon and oxygen were forged through stellar processes before Earth existed. Calcium in bone was made in stars and stellar explosions. Iron and hemoglobin came from nuclear furnaces powerful enough to tear stars apart. The body is not separate from the cosmos. It is a temporary concentration of cosmic material running a self-model at body temperature. For a few decades, star-made atoms learned to say I, then the voltage falls, the pump stops, the pressure wave ends. The brain's fuel delivery collapses. The sodium-potassium pumps lose the ATP stream required to maintain gradients. The circuit ceases to refresh the pattern. Heat diffuses. Molecules follow local chemistry. Cells lose boundary control. Microbes enter the calculation. The body returns to the same physics that built it, but without the organizing activity that made it a person. Nothing supernatural has to happen for this to be profound. A flame is a useful comparison, but only if handled precisely. A flame is not a substance sitting on the wick. It is a process. Vaporized fuel, reacting with oxygen, producing heat, light, carbon dioxide, water vapor, and turbulent flow. Blow it out, and no flame object flies to another room. The fuel molecules continue as products. The heat spreads. The light has already left at 300 million meters per second. The process ends because the conditions sustaining combustion have ended. Asking where the flame went is grammatically natural and physically misleading. The same may be true of the self. Where did the music go when the orchestra stopped playing? Where did the image go when the projector shut off? Where did the computation go when the voltage dropped? In each case, the answer is not nowhere, in the sense of a place called nowhere. The answer is that the process no longer exists as that process. Its components remain, its effects remain, its traces remain in other systems. But the active pattern is gone. Your life leaves traces. That part is physical too. Words spoken to another brain alter synapses there. A child's memory of a parent is a physical change in that child's nervous system. A book, a recording, a scar, a building, a photograph, a habit, taught by repetition, a sentence someone hears years after you are gone. These are not mystical survivals. They are externalized structure. They are copies, echoes, imprints. They do not preserve the private observer exactly, but they show that a human pattern can partially propagate into the world by modifying other matter. This is the only immortality physics already knows how to describe. Influence is transferred structure. It is limited, it is incomplete, it is not you waking up somewhere else, but it is not nothing. A person is not sealed inside the skin. Even in life, you are constantly writing yourself into other systems. Your voice vibrates air and changes brains. Your actions rearrange rooms, schedules, bodies, expectations, fears, loyalties. Your existence is not contained only in your atoms. It is also in the causal changes those atoms produce while organized as you. When the organization ends, the causal wave continues outward for a while, but it thins, it mixes. It loses resolution. 3 generations later, most human lives become a few stories, then a name, then a missing name, then no retrievable signal. This is not cruelty, it is entropy, applied to memory outside the skull. Without active maintenance, information degrades, photographs fade, languages shift, servers fail, families forget, civilizations misfile their dead. The universe is not built to preserve biographies automatically. Preservation requires work. This is why the question of the soul is not just about afterlife. It is about whether identity is a conserved quantity. Physics has many conserved quantities, but identity is not one of them. Identity is a pattern maintained by energy flow, repaired through feedback, stabilized by memory, and recognized by other pattern-making systems. It can persist through material turnover because the organization is maintained. It can fail before the body dies in dementia, injury, delirium, or anesthesia, because organization can be disrupted while atoms remain alive. It can leave traces after death because other systems were changed by it. But none of that requires an escaping particle of selfhood. The soul, if the word is used physically, is not a thing inside the machine. It is the machine running as a person. If the word is used metaphysically, physics becomes silent. Not respectful in a sentimental way. Silent because it has reached the edge of its instruments. A claim that does not interact with measurement cannot be processed by the machinery of science. It may belong to faith, philosophy, private experience, or language, but it does not belong to physics until it pushes something, heats something, bends something, emits something, changes a probability, or leaves a reproducible trace. That was Feynman's discipline. Do not fool yourself. Do not smuggle comfort into an equation. Do not name ignorance and treat the name as an explanation. To say the soul goes somewhere may be true inside a religious structure, but physics cannot confirm it by using conservation of energy. Energy conservation says the accounting balances. It does not say the accountant survives. It says forms change, chemical energy, heat, motion, radiation, mass energy under nuclear conditions. It does not preserve the shape of a thought. It does not label one jewel as belonging to your grandmother and another jewel as belonging to a stranger. Energy is bookkeeping, not biography. The biography lives in structure, and structure is fragile. A brain can lose consciousness from a small interruption in blood flow. A drug measured in milligrams can erase awareness for surgery. A clot only a few millimeters wide can remove speech. A degenerative protein process can slowly dismantle recognition until a loved face becomes an unidentified object. These facts are difficult because they show that the person is not merely associated with brain function. The person is deeply dependent on it. The circuit is not a costume. It is the operating condition. The comfort we want is separation. The evidence gives dependence, but dependence is not humiliation. It means every ordinary moment is a physical achievement. Standing upright is active control. Remembering a name is molecular maintenance. Forgiving someone is circuit modification. Holding a hand is pressure, heat transfer, mechanoreceptors, oxytocin release, prediction, memory, and trust running through tissue. A human being is not less because this can be described. The description shows how much had to go right for even 1 second of experience to occur. The universe had to build atoms, stars had to forge heavier elements, planets had to cool, chemistry had to find self-copying pathways. Cells had to learn membranes, pumps, gradients, motors, enzymes. Nervous systems had to evolve sensors, muscles, feedback loops, maps, and predictions. Social animals had to build memory into relationship. Language had to give the pattern a way to describe itself. Then for a short interval you appeared, not as a visitor to matter, as matter awake. So where does the soul go? If the question means where do the atoms go, they go everywhere slowly, by heat, air, water, soil, fire, and food chains, by chemistry and geology, by the indifferent logistics of matter. If it means where does the energy go, it spreads into the environment, conserved but degraded in usefulness, counted by thermodynamics rather than remembered by name. If it means where does the influence go, it goes into the people, and objects changed by the life, then decays unless maintained. If it means where does the private observer go, physics has found no path, no carrier, no detectable departure, no conserved personal signal. The pattern stops. That is the uncomfortable truth. A Feynman-like answer would force into the open. Not a theatrical denial, not a triumphant materialism, a colder statement. The universe does not owe the pattern a second substrate. It preserves what its laws preserve. It transforms what its laws transform. It allows temporary order when energy flows through matter in the right way. Then it relaxes that order when the flow can no longer be maintained. The atoms continue, the heat continues, the consequences continue for a while. The U was the arrangement. Put your hand against your chest again. The pump is still running, the pressure wave is still crossing the hydraulic network. The neurons are still spending ATP to hold their voltages away from equilibrium. The pattern is still being refreshed, frame by frame, without asking your permission. Whatever else one believes beyond physics, this much is already happening. Matter has arranged itself into a question, and for a little while longer the question can hear its own answer.